also when you take a space, you have a lot of freedom to change that space. So you're not you know, when you rent a place, you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to paint over all the walls. So I feel like squatting gives you the most freedom for altering a space and making it exactly what you want it to be, exactly the type of situation you want it to be. And it also really opens a door for a more intimate community, because when you're not paying rent, the social dynamics of your living situation change a lot, partially because you don't have a landlord that you're all sort of united against. And also, it's pretty standard right now for our lives to be based around sort of slaving away in these dead-end jobs to pay our rent. And when we don't have to pay rent, we can spend our time doing the things that we care about. Spend our time giving back to communities and being involved and being really present for each other in our houses and in our neighborhoods. So it really creates a small community where everyone has to be involved. And that's a really different type of living. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the basic steps, very, very basic steps, because there's going to be more workshops today about laws and the more nitty-gritty of it. But first I wanted to go over a little bit of vocabulary that people might not be familiar with. And you'll probably hear people using these words throughout the day. So we use the word crack or pop to open a squat. So if you crack a squat, it means that you've found an abandoned building, changed the locks, and started living there. We use the term front door or open door squat for kind of what it sounds like. It's a house where you openly go in and out, your neighbors know that you're there, you're using it openly as your address. Versus a back door or closed door squat, which is where you leave it boarded up, you're sort of sneaking in at night, and your goal is for no one to know that you're staying there. Another thing we talk about a lot is adverse possession, and that is a law that states in California that after 5 years of living in an abandoned house, you can potentially own that house through a very complicated court procedure. It differs from state to state. In California, it's 5 years. Other states, it's 7 years or 10 years. But that's adverse possession. You'll hear that a lot. When we talk about freegan culture and dumpstering and freeboxing, that's like finding your food and your clothes, all of your resources from the garbage, from the excess. And we talk about 602 penal codes a little bit. Those are basically trespassing codes. And we talk about out missions a little bit, and that's when you go out to look for houses. We call that an out mission. I'm gonna pass this over to Chrissy.
Hi everybody, I'm Chrissy. Sorry I'm late. I haven't paid rent in 6 years. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about my personal experience and my basic knowledge of squatting. Following up on, Alright. Thank you. So a good place to go after learning a little bit of the vocab is understanding the basic steps to acquiring the abandoned properties. And the very first basic step is deciding whether you want to do this alone or with a group of people. And it's good if you want to do this with a group of people to get your cohesive crew together and start scoping out the neighborhood, figure out where you kind of want to live, your epicenter, and branch out from there. Take the time to make a list, pick out buildings, start frequenting that area, and then the following step after you've scoped out a place is to go to the city assessor's office here in Oakland, or in other cities, you can go to City Hall. Also, there are internet websites varying from state to state where you can look up tax information. And research is a huge part of like really getting a stable space opened up. Once you've found out whether the house is, or warehouse or whatever, is in back taxes, owned by the city, perhaps someone's deceased and passed it to their children and they've lapsed on the taxes, you can put yourself in a much better position to perhaps a long-term acquisition of the property. Following the research, you can begin to keep an eye on your property and make there's this quintessential decision at a certain point where you have to decide, when am I gonna go in? Like, do you want to scope it out? Do you want to see how the neighborhood functions and see if it's definitely abandoned or not? Because a lot of properties, especially in a city as such, actually have like backdoor squatters in them already. But then you do the basic crack a squat. Usually go in at night on your first initial visit, and just usually you're taking off plywood, going inside, making sure that the floors are stable, checking out the roof. If you want to take a look at the electricity and the plumbing, that's always a smart idea. And then once you've gotten comfortable with the space, you move in. You move in and you want to be connected with your neighborhood. I mean, the ideal for most of us is to be a positive contribution to our like neighborhood and society. So you want to introduce yourself to the neighbors and shake some hands. Try to give an air of like positivity to what you're doing. Like, we're supposed to be here, we're helping out. Like, there are so many, benefits to, a collective space, if you will, whether you want to do that or not. That is better than having a flop house or a drug house on the block. Places might have been empty for decades too, you never know, and it might be something that the neighborhood's just been waiting for, and it could be a blessing or a curse. There's a period of time that I find in my experience as like a gray area. The first 2 consistent weeks that you occupy a space are really integral, because that's where you do a lot of your initial work, a lot of the cleaning out, a lot of the demo, rebuilding, but it's also that period of time where you can get kicked out quickly and easily. People will call the cops, you'll have a disgruntled like neighbor, and that's a period of time where you kind of want to have a secondary housing option backed up, because you might get kicked out at 3 o'clock in the morning and have to go somewhere. And the cops do roll deep. They definitely wake you up with guns, and that's not an entire joke. And that's not to scare you, it's just to prepare you for the reality of the situation. That's why it's great to communicate with your neighborhood to avoid that happening. I think that's it.
Yeah, I guess the thing that we really want to stress today is the idea of breaking this conventional idea of property and housing, because clearly it's not working. People are getting kicked out of their homes all the time, and we should be reclaiming this space, and we're hoping that we can share with everybody the tools to do that, because a lot of us have been doing this for a long time. So I guess I want to open up for question and answer, but some of them I might just revert you to different workshops, because there's going to be a lot going on in the next couple hours.
I guess, I don't know if this might be a horrible question, but what were some things at the beginning what are some mistakes that you made that you just realized?
I got a good one. Black mold. A lot of buildings have been empty and have extreme water damage, and as soon as you see any patches of dark black mold growing, you need to get dirty and bleach that shit right away, because it's invasive, it's bad for your lungs, and it gets even worse in colder climates, like it creeps inside. So I lived with black mold for 3 years, and now I have a super sensitivity to mold. I read a moldy book yesterday, and yeah.
Also, black mold is a neurotoxin, so like it can actually like give you brain damage by inhaling it. I actually squatted in New Orleans for a really long time, and I actually got like black mold poisoning.
Hazmat suits are awesome. Respirators, if you can get them, are always a plus. You wanna go ahead?
Yeah, you said that figuring out the tax situation on the building was important in not getting kicked out. Could you elaborate on that? Because I don't quite understand the connection.
The connection is that the tax information tends to reflect how much interest the owner has in a building. So if they haven't paid their taxes in 5 years, chances are they're not very invested in that building. And especially if they have a lot of back taxes and blight fines and things, the owner might not even want to be associated with that building because they don't want to have to deal with that debt.
And just to touch on that a little bit more, what can happen in certain cities is once a property has gotten to a certain number in back taxes, the city comes in and takes possession of the property. Possession not meaning any physical possession, but it's in their pocket. A lot of cities, like I'm from Philadelphia, most of my experience in squatting is from Philadelphia. We have a huge amount of blight. You can actually take classes at City Hall for free about buying those properties literally for a fraction of the back taxes in agreement with the neighborhood to rehabilitate the building and renovate it so that you're improving the neighborhood. So you can buy a house for $8,000. So taxes. Steve.
Before I go into this, I was helping with the PA. Did you guys talk about like squatter etiquette, like the crack it, keep it dynamic? Cover that?
Yeah, so where would I start? All right, so a lot of squatting is communal living. The concept of consensus is key. And when Steve says you crack it, you keep it, it's talking about the person and or persons who put the initial effort into finding the property, opened the property, and maintained it are the ones who are the possessors of the household. So you can't come in and usurp a household just because it was an abandoned property. You can't just come and bombard other people's squats. There is an etiquette, and we really thrive off of consensus. There's a lot of time and effort put into discussing all the things that come around because you're dealing with a lot more elements than if you're just paying rent. You know, you're debating whether to take care of utilities. The household has to flow and function in a way that doesn't make it boil over and fall apart. So, you know, you crack it, you keep it. If you opened it and put that effort in, generally it should still stay your property. And don't let yourself get run over. There was a squat in Philadelphia that one man busted out a gun and the house has been only occupied by him for 3 years, and this is an 8-bedroom house. And that's where the community failed to come in and stand up for that. That one house could have helped so many more people.
Not too much. The first question was, can you get information on building permits for the houses in Oakland? You get it at City Hall? And how can you get information on if the owners have changed? Can you get titles?
You can get that, the ownership information you can get from the recorder's office or the assessor's office. And I don't have a huge knowledge of property coding. Steve would be a good person.
List of property research.
Yeah. He's gonna do a whole workshop next on exactly that. And he can talk a lot longer than we can.
In some cities, you can find out the owner's name, but in Oakland in particular, it's not as easy to get a hold of the actual physical name and/or I think you can get the address here. You can get their name as well? Okay. In Philadelphia, all you have to do is go online.
Yeah. Yeah, in Oakland the name isn't listed online, but you can call and they give you the name. San Francisco Homes Not Jails is a good resource over there. Here, we sort of have a loose network of all the squatters in the area, but we don't have like a really defined group. We kind of just exchange contacts and do some solidarity when there are problems.
There is Land Action, is an informal nonprofit here in Oakland that's been around for some time, almost working on a decade now, I'm gonna say.
Land Action?
Yeah.
More like 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Oh no. It should have just been a decade, anyways.
6 months ago.
6 months.
6 months ago? There you go. 6 months ago. So
6 months.
that is a loose group that, I mean, it's wonderful to have a collective and unified group so that you can go into a space and have a veil almost. Like, I'm working with this group. It defers individual responsibility if anything goes wrong. And that way you stand together if you have to go into a courtroom. And it's really good.
When you occupy a place, do you in general attempt to establish that as your legal residence, or is that a bad idea or a good idea?
If your interest is in longevity, the longevity of that space, then it is a very good idea to do that, because if you can establish that as your residency, then you can, first of all, be arguing a lot of tenant rights laws if the owner tries to evict you. And ultimately, if that property is abandoned and the owner is not involved at all, that's what's going to be able to get you adverse possession.
I was wondering what the utility situation is like, and if you have those shut off, or if you have them turned on if they're already on.
Should I talk about Oakland?
Yeah, do Oakland and then I'll talk about non-Oakland.
In Oakland, you can get water turned on anywhere where there's a meter by calling PG&E this morning. There's water, East Bay Mud. You call it East Bay Mud, and you give them the address, you give them your name, and they will come and turn it on for you. And that's very easy. Electricity and garbage pickup are a little bit harder because they want to see that you have some official ownership or rental agreement in the house, and that can be hard to prove, but I've heard of people fudging them a little bit and being successful doing that.
Outside of this area, my experience has been that most of the time you do actually have to have your name on a lease in order to get electricity and water. However, there are plenty of buildings out there that still have electricity and water connected to them. So you can take your own initiative and find a way around it if you have to. But don't touch the electrical pole. Don't climb the pole. Don't climb. I don't advocate that at all.
What are all the different skill shares going on?
Oh, we were gonna write up a big poster, but does someone have that little flyer? So, oh no, not this one. The one with the schedule on it. There have been a couple changes. The main amphitheater is going to stay the same, so we're in Intro to Squatting now. At noon, we're going to have property law and squatters' rights. At 1, we're going to have occupying buildings as political strategy. At 2 is fighting foreclosures. At 3 is defending reclaimed spaces. And at 4 is a panel on the history of occupations in the Bay Area, of political occupations. Then the North Plaza one has changed a little bit. So I don't know if anyone has their schedule with them, but we are going to be serving a lunch shortly. And at 1 o'clock, there's actually going to be a self-defense training in the North Plaza. At 2:30 is going to be strategies for gaining access. 3:30 is going to be guerrilla gardening, so that's changed from 1:30. And 4:30 is going to be the forum on gentrification and squatting. And hopefully in the next short amount of time, we're going to make a poster with all of this on it, so you will be able to check it.
So on the issue of squatting
meet at noon in Property Law and Spotter Zone.